Welcome in, everybody. Ready to dive into another Shakespearean classic. Today, we're tackling Henry VI, Part 1.
Oh yeah, we've got excerpts from a pretty insightful scholarly article to guide us. Trust me, this isn't your typical Shakespearean stroll in the park. We're in for a wild ride.
Okay, lay it on me. What's the catch this time?
Right off the bat, Henry VI Part 1, or Harry VG, as it was probably first known, hits us with a big old mystery.
Let me guess. More mistaken identities. Star-crossed lovers.
This time it's about authorship. Who actually wrote the darn thing?
Wait, seriously, I thought Shakespeare writing Henry VI, Part 1 was a given.
You'd think so, right? But picture this. London, 1592. A play called Harry VJ premieres. Everyone's raving about it. Philip Henslow, big-time theater manager. He jots it down in his diary, right?
Makes sense so far.
But
Yeah.
he never actually connects it to Shakespeare.
Okay, now that's suspicious. So who are the suspects in this Shakespearean mystery? Spot.
Well, one name that pops up is Thomas Nash. See, he mentions a play with a Lord Talbot character. Sounds familiar, right? Probably from good old Harry VJ, one of his pamphlets from that same time.
A Nash theory. I'm listening.
But wait, it gets even juicier. Some scholars are throwing other names in the mix. Robert Greene, George Peele,
Hold on, are you about to say
even Christopher Marlowe.
Marlowe? As in, was it Shakespeare or was it Marlowe? Okay, now this is getting good. I can totally see why this debate's been raging on for centuries.
And for good reason. Henry VI, Part 1 just hits different, especially compared to Parts 2 and 3. It's almost like Shakespeare took an existing play, maybe one of those Nash collaborations, and gave it his own spin.
Shakespeare. The Renaissance remixer. I never thought about it that way.
Right. Back then, collaboration wasn't unusual in the theater world. Even if Shakespeare was part of a team, it doesn't make the final product any less impactful. It just adds another layer to the story, don't you think?
Totally. Speaking of stories, let's get into this one. Henry VI. Part 1 doesn't waste any time, does it? It throws us right into the thick of it. England's in a bit of a pickle after King Henry V kicks the bucket. Now his young son, Henry VI, is left holding the bag. Crown, I mean.
Talk about pressure. Not only does he inherit the throne at, 1 year old, but the kingdom's a mess. England's losing its grip on parts of France. Everyone's at each other's throats back home. Total recipe for disaster.
Talk about a trial by fire, right? And as if little Henry didn't have enough on his plate, we've got the Duke of Gloucester and the Bishop of Winchester going head-to-head. Makes today's political dramas seem downright polite.
It's more than just a power grab, though. This rivalry, it's symbolic,
Yeah.
The church versus the state fighting for the soul of England, and whoever controls the young king, well, they control the future.
So not just who's in charge, but what England's even going to be. And then we've got a young Richard III, or Richard Plantagenet as he's known at this point, lurking in the shadows, just starting to flex his own ambitions.
Shakespeare's a master at that, right? He weaves in those threads of ambition and how easily it corrupts. Richard's not the only one playing the game. You've got the Earl of Suffolk pulling strings, bringing Margaret of Anjou over to be Henry's queen.
Classic power behind the throne maneuver. But it's interesting how Margaret's arrival is already hinting at the Wars of the Roses. Shakespeare's sneaky like that.
Oh, totally. She's not just another pretty face. She comes in and shakes up the whole power dynamic from day one. But before we get too lost in the political weeds, we got to talk about the wild card, the enigma wrapped in a suit of armor, Joan of Arc.
Now, there's a woman who needs no introduction. Joan of Arc, the soldier saint, shrouded in mystery and controversy, and Henry VI, Part 1. It doesn't hold back. She's both this devout young woman and a brilliant military strategist.
That's what makes Shakespeare's portrayal so darn good. He doesn't give us a simple answer about Joan. Is she for real? Is it all an act? On the one hand, she's rallying the French troops, even taking down England's golden boy, Talbot.
Even I know about Talbot, and that's saying something. Not every day you see a legendary general like that brought low.
Exactly. But then Shakespeare throws in these hints of her cunning, her manipulations. And let's not forget, the English, they're eating up the whole Joan's a witch narrative.
It makes you wonder, was she really divinely inspired, or was she playing everyone, using whatever she could to get her way?
That's the beauty of it. Shakespeare's holding up a mirror, showing us how we love to put historical figures into neat little boxes, hero or villain. But it's never that simple, is it?
He keeps us guessing, makes us confront those messy complexities of history and human nature. Classic Shakespeare. Now, before we get to the grand finale of this Shakespearean roller coaster, we've got to talk about the Temple Garden scene. That's a game changer if I've ever seen one.
Oh yeah, when those red and white roses go from pretty flowers to symbols of, utter chaos. Genius. Leave it to Shakespeare to take something as ordinary as a rose and turn it into a weapon, right? And Richard Plantagenet, he knows exactly what he's doing.
Oh, absolutely. The guy's playing 4D chess while everyone else is stuck on checkers. He knows that sometimes a rose is more than just a rose. It's a declaration, a threat, a symbol.
And by making everyone choose a red or white rose, he's not just starting a fight, he's starting a war. The Wars of the Roses, to be exact. Talk about a power move.
Pure manipulation. But it's also brilliant. It highlights how powerful words can be, how easily they can be used to exploit, to divide. It's like that whole scene is a mini version of the play itself, a small disagreement exploding into a full-blown conflict.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale for any era, don't you think? Words can be weapons. Now, speaking of battles, we've got to talk about Lord Talbot. If anyone represents the old ways, the chivalric code, it's him.
He's like the poster boy for chivalry, always putting England first, even when it's a losing battle. But as the play goes on, it's like even honor has its limits, especially when you're up against someone like Joan of Arc.
It's a clash of titans, really. You've got Talbot stuck in his traditional ways, and Joan, she's fighting a different kind of war, a blend of faith, strategy, she's playing mind games. She understands the power shifting, while Talbot, well, he's struggling to keep up.
And it costs him, big time. His death scene, it's heartbreaking. But it says so much about how the world is changing, how the old ways are dying out. What's your take on that?
Talbot's death. It's more than just one man dying. It's the end of an era, you know? The chivalric ideal, it's fading away. And in its place, you've got guys like Richard Plantagenet, hungry for power, ready to grab whatever they can.
It's almost tragic when you think about it. And Joan's fate, just as bad, if not worse. One minute she's leading armies, the next she's captured, accused of witchcraft. They burned her at the stake.
It's brutal. And just like with her character throughout the entire play, Shakespeare leaves us hanging. Was Joan a pawn in a bigger game, or did her own ambitions lead to her downfall? It's a question that still resonates today.
That's what makes this play so powerful, right?
Yeah.
It's not just some dusty old history lesson. It's about ambition, about faith, about how slippery the idea of truth can be. These themes, they're universal, timeless.
Absolutely. And the language Shakespeare uses, the way he uses those red and white roses to symbolize, well, everything. It's a reminder that language can be a powerful tool. It can unite us. It can tear us apart. It all depends on who's wielding it.
So true. Okay, so as we get close to the end of the play, you can feel it, right? The tension's building. Henry might have made peace with France, agreed to marry Margaret, but it's not a real peace, is it? It feels temporary.
Right. And don't forget, the Earl of Suffolk, Mr. Margaret on the throne, this marriage, this is all part of his master plan. But, and I think everyone listening already knows this, Margaret of Anjou, she's nobody's fool.
She's about to turn the tables, isn't she? And Richard Plantagenet, don't think we've forgotten about him, waiting for his moment. The play might be ending, but this story, this is just the beginning. You know, it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You know it's coming, but you can't tear your eyes away.
Oh, absolutely. Shakespeare, he's a master of dramatic irony. He gives us, the audience, all the pieces. We know how this whole shebang plays out.
We've got that historical hindsight, right? But the characters, they're clueless, walking right into, well, you know.
It's kind of like life, isn't it? We're all making choices, thinking we're in control, but who knows how it'll all shake out in the end, right?
Makes you think. So we've talked about chivalry biting the dust, ambition running wild, but when people listen back to this deep dive, what's the one thing, the big takeaway you want them to remember about Henry VI, Part 1?
You know, for me, it's how relevant it still feels. You know, these characters, they're flawed, they want power, they're just trying to figure things out. Sound familiar?
Oh, yes, some things never change, do they? It's like Shakespeare's holding up a mirror to human nature, and what we see is, well, we see ourselves.
And he does it all with this incredible language, beautiful, brutal. It runs the gamut. That's why we're still talking about these plays, still putting them on stage.
Exactly, and why we love taking these deep dives, peeling back the layers. But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with something to chew on, something to spark their own imagination. What if Henry VI, Part 1, was being staged today? Not just a regular production, but like reimagined for right now. Who would you cast? Who could capture that Joan of Arc energy, or Talbot's unwavering loyalty, or even, dare I say, Richard's ambition? Think about it, folks. And until next time, happy reading.